There we go. Live. We are live. Greetings, everyone, on this Thursday evening, and welcome to Litquake on Lockdown. My name is Jane Ganal. I'm the co-founder of Litquake. This is the second edition of this virtual series, which presents literary events once or twice a week. We started April 1st, and now we're going through July 29th. All programs will start at 6 p.m. unless otherwise noted, and you can find the full schedule at litquake.org. This is our 21st year as a festival for Litquake, and as you know, it's an incredibly strange and trying time we're going through right now. Also, a very enlightening time in which we're hearing all kinds of stories that need to be heard, and I think tonight will be an example of that, something we hope will be very eye-opening for everyone. Quick orders of business. If you want to ask the participants a question, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a place where you can write questions and they will see them. Very cool. You can also support the participants tonight by clicking the green button at the bottom about buying books. That will go either to your favorite online indie bookstore or to bookshop.org. We also ask for your support for Litquake. We're putting on this entire series for free, as we are wont to do. So please feel free to donate to Litquake as well. We would really, really appreciate it. And now on with the show. I want to introduce you to the two folks that will be in conversation tonight, and they are old friends, so this could be very much fun. Tom Barbash said, I don't need to introduce him because everybody knows who he is, and that is probably true, but I'm going to do it anyway. Briefly, Tom is the author of 4 books, 2 novels, 1 book of short stories, Stay Up With Me, which rocked my world, as a big fan of short stories. And his most recent novel, The Dakota Winters, is just out in paperback and is now a New York Times bestseller. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 New York Times bestsellers tonight. Speaking with him is first-time author, the kind of person we all love to hate because she's had such incredible success. 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. Born in India, Alka has lived in the United States since the age of 9. She graduated from Stanford and worked in the fields of advertising and PR before starting her own marketing consultancy down on the Monterey Peninsula. In 2011, she went back to school and got her MFA in creative writing from the California College of the Arts in San Francisco. The Henna Artist is her first novel, and it was just selected by Reese Witherspoon for her book club selection. So as you know, the book has also gone 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. I'm sure a lot of you who are tuned in tonight have read the book, but just to give you the backdrop, Lakshmi is a 17-year-old young woman in India who is fleeing an arranged and abusive marriage. She arrives in Jaipur, where she becomes a henna artist and confidant to many of the wealthy women of the city. But she is, even though she is trusted with their secrets, she has many of her own that she cannot reveal. And it's just a beautiful story about a young woman's coming of age, and a young woman who has historically been in a class that is historically repressed. So hopefully we will touch on those themes tonight, and you're in good hands with Tom Barbash and Alka Joshi. Please welcome them, and I will come back at the end and thank everyone for coming. Thank you for coming as of right now.
Well, I mean, everybody who's here who may not know, the one part that Jane didn't say, which I'm happy to share with you all about my relationship with Alka, is that when Alka in 2011 decided to go to graduate school, we were fortunate that she came to my school, to California College of the Arts, and our whole faculty, and I know Anita Amrasvani and Amy Fan and so many people that worked with Alka are so proud of you, Alka. But I think you and I can both agree that Jane's assessment of 0 to 60, it doesn't quite feel like that, right? When you've been working as long and as hard as you have. Would you agree with me?
Absolutely right. 10 long years of getting the novel to the point where it could be shown to publishers. And I think you mentioned right before we got started, it's all about perseverance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, our profession, or the profession of writing, is different than a lot, because how many professions, like if you're a lawyer and you've been working hard as a lawyer for 10 years, people for your profession see your results, right? But in writing, you can be doing, I mean, all the great work that's in this book, you were doing for the last 10 years, but nobody knows it. And you can tell them I'm working on a book, and it seems like an abstract thing, like, oh, Alka's still working on that book, right?
I know, and it's almost like you don't want to tell people. You don't want to say to people, I'm working on something, because then the next time you see them, they're going to say, well, how is that coming? Well, how do you answer that? There's so many different ways you can answer that, because maybe you're on your 5th draft and they don't really understand what that means, right? So maybe you're changing entire characters. Maybe you're changing entire scenes. Maybe you're changing the ending. There are so many things that go into revising and making a book publishable that, yeah, you almost don't want to tell people I'm working on anything, because you don't want to be held accountable to some timeline. It's all arbitrary, right, Tom? Because we're not producing something that somebody said, I've got to have this. We're producing things that are fiction. They're out of our imagination. Nobody said, I've got to read the Henna Artist now. Alka, you've got to write it. Yeah,
I don't know if you had this happen, Alka, but my story with my first book, which took a long time as well, is that everybody would ask me about it, and then suddenly they stopped asking, you know, because it had been so long. And that was when it really kicked into gear. And then suddenly they're like, oh, that's what you were doing all these years. Well, it's such a terrific book, and you know, and we're so proud of you. And in terms of people saying you need to fit, we all wanted this book out in the world. So, you know, there were people, and I think that's a big part of it, is that you have these trusted readers whose taste is, you know, it's their approval is important to you, and I had that as well. So I have a lot of different things I want to get into. I guess I wanted to start with the beginning, the first line of the book, and just as sort of a launching off was, independence changed everything. Independence changed nothing. And if you could talk about, yeah, because this is right, independence is 47, is that right? So
independence was 1947, and the book takes place in 1955. And so we had 8 long years now in India to decide whether independence has made a difference or not. And as with any kind of change that happens, some things are going to change and some things never change. So the sort of feeling that you get when you go to India, the heat, the smells, the curries, the sort of melee of people, those are all exactly the same as they ever were. But what did change, of course, is that the British left some good things. They left some paved roads, and they left some bridges and dams. But what changed was the way that Indians were feeling about having the freedom once again, of having their country back after 300 years of British and East India Company rule. And before that, there had been Mughals that had ruled India for centuries, and so on and so forth. Everybody had wanted everything that India had to offer. So finally, the Indians had India for themselves. And I wanted to capture that exuberance, that energy, that fabulous feeling that everybody was having. And it's the same kind of trajectory that Lakshmi, our protagonist, is going through, right? So she also is on a journey of independence. She's not quite there. She is still feeling her way through it. She's still trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, what's better for her. And so she's mirroring the same kind of energy that is happening all throughout India at this point in 1955.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if, I think I probably told you, but after college, I went to India, and I went to Jaipur, and I took the Pink City Express from Agra, you know, and you know, so a lot of the stuff in the book are places that I've been to, Palace of the Wind, you know, reading all this, and it's an amazing place. Yeah. So, but you know, you and I were talking, I wrote my book about where I'm from and where my family's from. And in many ways, I got asked to talk on book tours about New York. And I got to talk about what New York meant to me as a kid, as an adolescent, you know, and as adult. And I'm wondering about India in your, you know, as a child, your sense of it, your sense, you know, as a young woman, and then, you know, when you're writing the book, how it is it's changed in, over time for you, the meaning of the place?
It has changed so much in my brain. Tom, when we first came to this country in 1967, I was thrust into an environment where there were no other Indians in my classrooms. We went from Rajasthan to the Midwest. First we were in Iowa, then we were in Kansas, then we were in Missouri, then we were in Kansas, the heartland. And so I had this experience where all of a sudden I was the other. I had always been like everybody else. Then all of a sudden I'm different. And I don't want to be different. I want to be like everybody else. So I am trying really hard to just, blend in, to disappear in the crowd. And I think the last thing I wanted to be was Indian. I just didn't want to be Indian. I just wanted to be American, whatever that means. Jeans, McDonald's hamburgers, T-shirts, that kind of thing. And so in my later years, when I was going back to India a lot with my mother, that's when I really saw India in a different way as an adult and through my mother's eyes. And I could see all the beautiful things about India that she had loved, the fruit that she can't get anywhere else that she loved to eat, the flowers, oh my gosh, the abundance of flowers, the colors of Rajasthan, all of those hot colored saris against the desert of Rajasthan. It was just amazing. And I thought, oh, this is my birthland. This is what I love also. And so I got a chance to reclaim my heritage through the process of writing this book. That was a huge thing for me. And I am proud now to be able to say, yeah, I was born in India. I am Indian and I'm American. And I'm many things, just like you are, just like we all are. We are so many different things. We can't limit ourselves to just one small piece of the world.
It's funny. I think we might all have stories like that. In mine, I don't know if I told you this, but when I was in graduate school, I had just lived in upstate New York, and I didn't want the baggage of New York City. Like everyone wants to be from New York City. I didn't. And I told everyone I was from upstate New York, and I dressed like that. And all my stories were about upstate New York. And suddenly I started writing New York City stories, and I was like, okay, I can reclaim that. But so talk about the origins of the book. And I know your mother plays a big part in terms of your conception of the book. But,
yeah.
But the writers and readers want to know, what was the germ? What did you begin with? What made you think like, okay, I might have a novel here?
So at the same time that I started the MFA program at CCA, which really...
Talk about that a little bit. Yeah. You can talk us up anytime you want, Alka.
So the California College of Arts in San Francisco. I was very conscious about going there because I knew you were there, I knew Anita was there, and I knew Amy was there. And I had read your books, and I had loved the books, and I wanted to study with you guys because I knew that if I was going to write something similar, that you all could help me make it better. And so I was very conscious in my choice of CCA. And at the same time that I started going there, my mother started to get nostalgic and wanted to go to India. And just the year or two prior, my brother had bought a condo in Jaipur, not because he lives there, but because he knew that my parents were getting older and wanted to go back home. And so I started to take my mom there. And so I am writing some of these key scenes in the book, and I'm getting the flavor of India right there in Jaipur as I'm going through the program. That was really crucial because, as you know from the whole New York experience, and when you're writing about New York, when you're actually there, you get a whole different sense of how to talk about it. You get the energy of the place. And so that's sort of where it started. And then as I was there with her, I was asking her all these questions like, what were your favorite subjects in school? What did you like to play? Who were your best friends? And so as we started to talk a lot more about her girlhood, I started to think, what if she could have done anything she wanted to do in her life? What would she have done? What if she could have had the opportunity that she gave me, her only daughter, to just, as a free-for-all with my life, do whatever you want, honey, do whatever you want with your life, marry whoever you want, have as many children or don't have children, whatever you want to do, you do that. And so I thought, what if I could give her this alternate life in fiction that she never had in her real life? She had an arranged marriage. She was always constrained by society. This is how you act. This is how you act in public. These are the kind of foods you must prepare. This is how many feet you walk behind your husband at all times. You never call him by his first name. You know, these are all rules that she had to live by. And so it was the germ of where this whole thing started. And then Tom came the hard work of actually putting the novel to bed. And that was the longest journey of all, because once you guys were my thesis advisors, you and Amy and Anita. And so you guys gave me a lot of kudos and a lot of encouragement for the Henna Artist. And you said, okay, this is a great thesis, keep going with it. And I didn't realize that keep going with it meant that I would have to rewrite entire scenes. I would have to eliminate characters, that I might have to rearrange, structurally things in the book to make things work. So that's the work, and that work took me to the very end, and I got to know the characters so well. You know, when you're with characters, as you know, for a really long time, and they're in your head all the time, and you're putting them on the page all the time, you get to know them. They almost live inside you. And you can almost imagine how they would act in almost any setting, any kind of scene that you put them into. So the first book took like almost 10 years. The sequel took me 5 months. And now HarperCollins bought the sequel, and the sequel's coming out next year. So now I feel like, okay, now I think I got it. I got the hang of this writing thing after 10 years.
Yeah, and we're expecting the third in the trilogy in 2 weeks. So, right, that's deep. So there's something else I want to talk to you about, and that is so, I love what you just said about your mother and that idea. I think Andy Greer was saying something about the kind of doppelganger thing you can do in novels. You can live the life you wish you would have lived, or in your case, you wish your mother had led. But the other thing that you got to do was inhabit this artist, this henna artist in the world of henna, and she's an herbalist. And I, in my book, I got to explore the world of, John Lennon and TV in a way, and you do this kind of deep dive into it. So I wanted to talk to you about two things. I wanted to talk about the pleasures of discovering all this new field, this new world. And then when do you have to turn it off? Because you have to remember that this isn't just sheer enjoyment of this great texture you've come up with. It has to be this kind of living, breathing, problematic story of human beings in conflict, etc. Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine in Dakota Winters how you were able to take all of that research on John Lennon, on the building itself, on what was happening in the 80s in New York. Look at all the research that goes into it, and you can only slot the pieces that really organically want to fit in the story. You can't do a brain dump of all of that. So it's not like the old, James Michener stories, remember, where one chapter was all history and the other chapter was all,
right.
Scenes, and then history and scenes. Now what we're doing is we're writing things so that the research goes organically into all of the scenes and the characters. That just took time. That just took a lot of finessing. I would write a scene. I must have written every key scene in that book 30 times, because you want to get every little piece right so that it feels real to the reader. And if it doesn't feel real to the reader, then you're going to lose them. And pacing is the other thing that we have to learn as we do a novel. I remember I took that novel class with you, and we used John Gardner's book, I think. And one of the things is you have to maintain pacing. Otherwise, once again, that is an area in which you might lose your students easily. So I had, in my first couple of times that I was doing the drafts of the book, I had a strong start, and then it would just kind of go down, and people would go, okay, I lost you at chapter 5. I can't, your reviewers are so important, right? Your reviewers are so important to let you know very honestly where the story is not coming together and where the tension is falling off.
Yeah, and then we teach ourselves to read our own books as a reader at some point. This like where, and you can tell, right? You're reading your own book, and you're all of a sudden like, you realize where, and as you said, where the pacing falls off. Well, the thing that what your story demonstrates is, yes, you might people would think if you rewrote something 30 times that would be a terrible thing to work through, but when you rewrite it 30 times, it reads like it came straight out of your head somehow. It's like, it's that kind of revision that ends up. There's a line in Wallace Stegner's Crossing the Safety where the young writer is at a party and he talks about it to an older writer, and the older writer asks him how the writing's going. It's absolutely miserable, and he says something to the extent of something like, miserable writing leads to really enjoyable reading. There is a connection between how hard you're working right now is going to make a good experience for me. So. So talk about these characters, talk about Radha and Lakshmi and your sense of them. How has the way in which the book is being read now that you're reading reviews and people are responding to your characters, does it line up with your sense of who they are? Are there some differences, some surprises in the way people are responding and entering the book?
So whenever I get an email or a letter. I got this beautiful letter from an 18-year-old in Plano, Texas the other day about how much she loves novels and she loved the book and she loves this, the themes of the book about female empowerment and making sure that women have a chance to, do whatever they need to do. But whenever I hear from a reader, I always ask them, which character most resonated with you? There are so many female characters in the book and there are male characters in the book. And I'm always surprised. The majority of people will say they love Lakshmi, who is our henna artist, who is at the start of the novel, 30 years old. She's been doing this for 13 years. She is at the cusp of achieving what she thinks is success, which is the house that she has built for herself. Nobody will be able to tell her to leave this house the way that she had to leave her own village home at the age of 15 when she had to get married. And nobody will have the key to her home. She thinks this is the apex of success. But just as she is about to accomplish that, her sister Radha, 13-year-old Radha, shows up at the doorstep with her husband, whom she had deserted 13 years prior. Of course, she's never told the Society of Jaipur that she deserted her husband, and they've all assumed that he abandoned her. So they never bring up the subject. So then there's Hari, who is the husband who shows up. And she has her own idea of how Hari used to be, how he used to abuse her, which is one of the reasons why she ran away from the marriage. And, she's in for a little bit of a shock there. She's in for a little bit of a shock at having to suddenly be the older sister / mother of a 13-year-old. That comes as a huge surprise. And then, of course, there are the characters like Parvati, who is really her antagonist, and sort of a rival for the love of Parvati's husband, whom Lakshmi is very attracted to, and he's attracted to her. So there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of different storylines that are going on. There's the major plot of Lakshmi's journey, but then there are all those little subplots where different people pop in, and their subplots are affecting what's going on with her.
What I was going to say, and it has this wonderful quality of, I love when people in stories where people run away from something and it follows them in some way, or running away from her fate as a mother and then having and becoming, in a sense, a mother. And also, as an herbalist, she's got this complicated relationship to the idea of motherhood because she's giving these anti-contraceptive treatments for these men for their mistresses, right? So I love that. I love this. Just because we make this decision doesn't mean that we now can consciously write our own story, or in the past.
And I think that's what makes for interesting characters who live with contradictions, because I think we all live with contradiction. And so that feels real to us, like we may be doing publicly one thing and then privately we're doing something else. Like Lakshmi, like you said, she is giving out these sachets that are preventing babies from being born. And on the other hand, she might be feeding one of her clients something in a savory or a snack that is going to actually help her get pregnant because that's what she desires. So yeah, she is tending to these two very opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. But that's almost like Planned Parenthood now, right? Because they have the combination of helping people one end and also helping people, it's not just a place for abortions, it's also a place for where people plan family. It's complicated. So there's another line, you have these great lines, and I don't know when they come about in the writing process. Well, you'll have this kind of declaration about, like that first line about partition. Then there's this line, in India, there was no such thing as shame. Humiliation spread as easily as oil on wax paper to the entire family. And that interested me, that idea of the responsibility that Lakshmi takes. Okay, so this thing that I did because I needed to do for myself, but she feels such responsibility for what it unleashes. And you're saying that's a societal thing, right? That idea.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that idea. Yeah, we'll just talk about that a little bit.
In many Asian cultures, so this is not just India, this is Pakistan, Afghanistan, a lot of the Mideast, a lot of the northern African countries, and even southern China, or actually all over China, the idea that the group comes before the individual, family comes before individual every single time. So that when you take a decision, you need to consider everyone in your family. You need to consider the extended family, even your whole village, because something you do will impact them and their reputation. But here in the West, it's totally the opposite. It's all about the individual. It's about what I want. It's about what I can accomplish. And so Lakshmi is sort of bucking the trend there, the societal trend in India during that time. And she is trying to say, well, what about me as an individual? Don't I have a voice? So even today in India, this is so true about the whole societal idea that the family is more important than the individual. When two families have an arranged marriage, those are two families getting married. It's not just the two individuals who tie themselves together for 7 lifetimes. It is the entire families that are tying themselves together. So that's a lot of pressure on somebody to try to break that, to try to get out of a marriage that was arranged in that way and with those constraints. That it takes a lot of courage for somebody to say, I don't want to be there anymore. I am leaving.
But that's why Lakshmi is so fascinating, because she makes a decision and then she still has a devotion to family, even though she makes a decision that's right for her. But that doesn't mean that the job of devoting your life to a larger sense of family, it's still there for her, right?
Right.
So,
and I think in a way, Tom, I think what I'm trying to say is that old habits are hard to break. If you were raised a certain way, it's very hard to get that out of your DNA completely.
Right. So, your book is about this complicated place for women in Indian society. And you think about our society where we imagine women have risen faster. And yet Indira Gandhi when did she take over India? When was it in the 80s? Was it early 80s?
It was in the 70s and 80s. Yeah.
There you go. So how does that happen? And we still can't elect a woman here. So.
Well, India is a place of contradictions. You have women at very high places in politics, also a lot of doctors that are female, dentists, lawyers, and yet they still live within the societal constraints. All those same people will also have had an arranged marriage, most likely. 70% of India still has arranged marriages and still abides by what the family wishes them to do.
Can you talk a little bit about about the caste system, but also the class of the wealthy? The people who are Lakshmi's clients. And I'm also wondering. So then now, as India has changed so much and become a much wealthier country, and I'm wondering if there's less of a caste system now that there's more money and more jobs to go around, or so. A kind of big question there, but
yeah. So I think that the caste system is still prevalent, but what I tried to show in my novel is how it's lived in a very organic way every single day. You are somehow reminded of what caste you might be, or maybe you live a certain way and that tells everybody else what your caste is. You know, you have a Brahmin who will live next to a Kshatriya, who will live next to a Vaishya, and who, you know, so you have all of these different castes that will live in a neighborhood together, but they're always very keenly aware of what caste they are. I thought last year I went to India to actually answer this question that you're asking me. And I thought, well, I'm sure that this has changed. And so I was talking to a group of women. They are all going for some kind of a graduate degree. And I said, you know, are you at all conscious of caste? Like when you go into classes with people, when you hang out, you know, at the mall with people. And they said, oh no, we have friends from all castes, all different castes. We don't care about caste. And I said, all right, so are you going to have an arranged marriage? And 70% of them said, yeah, we are. And I said, okay, so then when your parents look for a potential partner for you, how are they going to do that? Are they looking outside your caste? And there's a moment of silence. And then they go, no, they're going to look within the community. So there is a contradiction there between what the young people think they are tolerant of or accepting of, but their parents, the generation that's actually determining their future, is still very conscious of caste. When you open up an Indian newspaper today, you will actually see in the wedding section where people are looking for prospective brides and grooms, you will see that entire section is divided by caste. So you'll see Brahmins and all of their classifieds will be listed there. And then, you know, the warrior caste and then the servant caste, everybody will have their own section. So it's hard to say that that's going to go away anytime soon when the evidence is right there in every single paper you open up.
So from what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of social mobility. Like, is there a lot of, is there, you know, the American dream of starting with nothing and rising up? Does that exist in India, that sense that if you work hard, you know, at school, that you can rise? Or is it less of a, does it seem like your station's pretty much fixed based on who your parents are?
I think it's easier now than it was in the 1950s, but I think it's still an uphill climb for a lot of people. What's happened is that just like here, we had the affirmative action programs in the 60s and 70s and 80s. In India, there are those kinds of things. They're called reservations, and they are a certain number are set aside in each college for the lower castes. And so that, you know, that has helped elevate a lot of people into another social strata. So, you know, that it's a difficult thing to answer. It's a difficult thing to even admit that the country is still, I think, very focused on social class and caste, but I think the majority of the country is. Now, that said, probably in the 1950s, it would have been 90% of the people would have stuck to their caste. Now you actually have young people who do say, you know what, I am in love with this guy. I met him at college and I'm going to marry him. And I told my parents, and that's okay with them. So that is happening more. And likewise, when I was in India last year, there was a woman for the first time. She had fought for this for 9 years. She fought to get a certificate that has no religion and no caste on it. Because, you know, when you have an official certificate that says, here is where I was born, this is what I was doing, it has a caste on it. So she is trying to get rid of that, and more people are following suit and saying, okay, it doesn't matter to me. I don't want anybody to know my caste, because that does put me in a certain place all the time.
Right. Well, speaking of modern India, your book's about to come out in India, as you told me, and this has to be exciting. And you told me, so Alka just told me, folks, that she's going to be featured in Indian Vogue. Is that right? Did I get that right? As well as India's Harper's Bazaar. I asked her why my book wasn't in Indian Vogue. You know? So no,
not enough jewelry, Tom. You need to have more jewelry.
But kind of nervous making. No, I mean, is there any sense of like, well, you know, this is a response to my book in the States, but any apprehension about how folks in India are going to respond? Or you seem at ease. You've probably gotten some good advance notice of how it's gone over so far, but how do you feel about you know, it's going to be different, right? Or it's going to be pretty interesting.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because one of my biggest fears was, and I'll bet you've gone through this when you have written stories about a certain place or a certain time. One of my biggest fears was people in India might think that I had somehow misrepresented Rajasthan, misrepresented Jaipur, misrepresented the Indian people. But the opposite is exactly true. So many people in India and the Indian diaspora here in the United States, in Australia, in Canada, in all parts of the world who have somehow gotten a hold of this book are saying, thank you so much. This book gives me pride in my country, in where I came from, in our customs and our food and our style of dress. It is making people feel so prideful. And I just cannot tell you how exciting that is, and how that is something I never expected in a million years to come from this book. And I'm just so happy. You know, my dad is so proud of me. My brothers are so proud of me. And, you know, it's just been it's a journey of reawakening for me to love India again, my birthplace. And then also it's been this wonderful thing for all these other people who are reading it, saying, you know, this gives me pride in where I'm from. Oh, it's just fantastic.
What about, you know, I mean, there have been so many, it seems like, think of Akhil Sharma and Jhumpa Lahiri, and I mean, so many wonderful voices coming out of India. You know, has that been a inspiration for you, you know, as a first novelist? I mean, as you know, have gone through graduate school and seeing all the writers, you know, that have succeeded before you?
Yes, it's been fantastic to see so many Indian writers climbing the literary charts, and also to see so many poignant themes coming from them. These aren't just happy-go-lucky kind of books. These are books about very serious subjects. There's a whole immigrant experience. There's the whole idea of sexual abuse, I think, in Sharma's book. And then there is Aravind Adiga's White Tiger, which is all about social class and status. And so these people are just coming out with some amazing literature, which of course I have read all of it. You know, I love reading, first of all. Reading is the path to writing, right, Tom?
Yeah. I always have said this often, but if someone tells you they want to be a writer and then you say, well, what do you read? They go, I don't really like reading. You don't have a lot of hope. You're like, well, I don't really see how that works. Yeah.
Oh, Tom, okay, so here's another thing that I kept hearing from young people who want to write. They say, well, I don't want to do any of the marketing. And you know what? Marketing is part of getting the book out there. We would love to live in a world where it's just all about the integrity of the work, and that people will find it and they will love it and they will buy it. But the reality is, you have as much to do with the success of what you're putting out there as the work itself. So, you know, my publisher told me a year and a half before the book came out, they said, please start your Instagram, please start your Facebook accounts. And I was just like kicking and screaming. I'm like, no, I don't want to. I'm not going to post pictures of my food. I don't want to do that. But then I got into it. And I realized that, like, on Instagram, it was all about posting pictures of Jaipur and my mother's saris and the jewelry of India and the cuisine of India and all the things that I talk about in the book. So it became like this wonderful photo essay of everything that was in the book, and I just enjoyed it. And I would work late into the night and just make sure that, I was on social media, I was doing all of these things. So you actually can get into the marketing part of it, even if you don't want to. And chances are, most young people are already on all of these social platforms anyway. So that was a real eye-opener for me, that marketing your own book. Of course, I come from the world of marketing and advertising. That's what I've been doing all these years anyway. So I know how important it is to talk about what you're putting out into the world. But I didn't realize that I would actually enjoy the social media part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I probably told you this, but I always feel like if there's two Alkas, one is the one who hid away and wrote her book for 10 years, and the other one is the one who's trying to get Alka's book out into the world. If that other one doesn't do her job, she's screwing over the one who worked so hard. So you have to be able to separate yourself and not think like, oh, I can't do that, because, yeah.
Well, haven't you also found as a writer during the pandemic, your life probably hasn't changed that much? Because, we spend so much time alone as writers. We spend time in front of our computer or with a tablet or a pad or whatever. We spend so much time alone in our heads that really, with the self-isolation, I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. I can do that, no problem, right?
Well, let's talk about what's going on today. And, I when I was in India, I remember I read Freedom at Midnight, that book. And but just maybe at this point in 55, things are at a good place. But around partition, there was tremendous amount of sadness and awful stuff that was going on. And now you see this moment in our country, here, what sort of things, if you because you're going to be asked, and so I'm asking you here about what aspects of your book do you think about, or the experience of your characters, and our experience now with the country being divided the way it is.
I think that the ability to persevere, the ability to be resilient despite all the obstacles in front of you, that is a major theme of the book. And that is what the women in the book, I think, are really all about. It's their struggle and trying to get beyond that, trying not to let it get them down, so far down that they can't go forward. So I think even in what all the struggles that we're having today, we need to persevere, we need to understand, we need to accept, we need to, I think I just read something today that said, don't talk about tolerance or acceptance, talk about understanding each other in the racial equation. And I think that this is exactly what helps Lakshmi as a character deal with all of her clients and why she is so much in demand. She really understands. She tries really hard to understand the desires and the needs of those people and to try to address them in a way that helps those women realize their desires and needs. So I think, the main thing I would say is I think it's about understanding the other perspective, understanding why it exists, and maybe being able to admit that you are at fault, which is something that Lakshmi is able to do also. I think admitting that maybe we haven't been as fair as we needed to be, we haven't been just as we needed to be, and we can take another look at that and see how we could change. So Lakshmi, in her journey, changes at the end, right? She thinks that she's toward this one goal, and then she realizes that was a false goal, that the goal really this whole time has been the thing that really helps her shine from the inside, which is to help heal other people. So helping heal people is, I think, a goal that we should all have in our lives. We probably do it. You have children, you have a son, you have students, so you probably have a goal of making them better human beings, of helping them become, better in society, more successful. And I think that, that's what we all need to do with whomever we live with around us.
But I feel like doing what, you and I do, I tell my students sometimes is, I hope you're going to be writers. More my graduate students, I think they're all going to be writers, but my undergrads, I don't know. But I say by taking this class, I think you're likely to be a better boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, friend, because you'll understand subtext, you'll empathize. There's all sorts of ways. You're going to jump inside someone else's consciousness and try to understand it and comprehend it. But just the act of reading and writing and sharing, and that thing is profoundly generous, I think, and needed right now.
Right.
I would like to ask you again, because there's a lot of writers here. I'd like to ask you about maybe a couple low points in the process where, like those ditches or those times, if you ever reached a point where, oh my God, I'm never going to finish this book.
Oh.
I don't know why I even thought I could do this. The world sucks, and if you could talk about those and how it was that you got out of that ditch, because we all do, and our students, they fall into that, and you try to help them out of it. But can you talk about a couple of those moments?
Yeah, I think every time that I got a stack of edits that were recommended by my agent, by an editor, and by a reviewer, every time I got that, I just thought, oh no, I can't. I thought I was done. I was supposed to be done. I was supposed to be done a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Why do I still have to keep working on this? Yeah, I had a lot of those kind of low points, and I would just have to step away for a while. My husband, Brad Owens, whom you know, is also a writer. And so I think he has been really good in those times at handling my anxiety and just saying, okay, you know what? Just step away from the computer, just change your activity, just don't even deal with it for a couple of months. There's no hurry. I didn't have a publisher waiting for a deadline. So, there's no hurry, just go ahead and take some time off. So he would, was a really good source of comfort for me during these kind of times. I have an incredible family. I have my brothers and my dad. My mother is passed now, but my brothers and my dad, they are great listeners. I can always call them up and say, and they're always like, oh, buck up, it's going to be fine. You'll get through this, right? Because we all get through it. We just forget in the heat of the moment that we are always going to be able to go past that hill. We've always been able to do it, and we will do it again. March 2020 was a classic example of where I just wanted to bury my head under the covers and say, I worked on this novel for so long, and now I don't get to talk to readers. I was so looking forward to talking to readers. And now with the pandemics, okay, so here is the good stuff that even happens when there's something bad going on. Virtual book clubs. I am adoring virtual book clubs. So you have a group of maybe 20, maybe 25, maybe just 6 or 7 people, and you get to talk to them one-on-one virtually about your book. This is not something that I would have had the opportunity or even thought about doing had I gone off, on a book tour. And, my publisher had set up all these book tours and conferences and yada yadas. And, I would have just been able to meet like 1 or 2 people, personally, one-on-one. Now with virtual book clubs, it's fantastic. Don't you just love talking to book clubs all the time?
They're great. And part of it is just, they're so interesting because we say this and people don't quite understand it, but the book doesn't really belong to us. It belongs to the reader, and the reader brings their own experience to bear, and they're going to read things and enter into your stories and your novels in ways that surprise you. And it's really fun to hear that. It's real and really interesting. And I got some really strong and interesting reactions from people who lived in the Dakota too. Like I had this weird thing I'll just share with you, which is that I went to the Dakota twice, but one thing I sort of just winged it. I decided that my characters lived in Boris Karloff's apartment and that it was on the same elevator chain as Leonard Bernstein and John Lennon, right? So that was just and I didn't know where all the apartments were. I got a handwritten letter from a woman, and she said, our family had the Boris Karloff apartment. It was on the same elevator chain as Leonard Bernstein and John Lennon.
Wow.
And she said that friends of hers had seen John Lennon come out of the elevator or in the elevator whistling Norwegian Wood. So she was so fun. And you probably had that where you put something and, hoping, who knows, and someone has this reaction.
Yeah.
What are we going to say? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I've had these heartfelt letters from women. I got a call one day from a woman in Mumbai, and I didn't know who, I've never met her. I've never heard of her. And she said, Alka, I just read the Henna Artist, and I have to tell you, it feels like you wrote my story.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh my God, it's just amazing. And then, she just made me cry because she was married to an abusive man. She found a way to get out. And now when we were talking, she was just so happy. She's just in a happy place. She is raising her son by herself as a single woman. And guess what? Now that she's raising him as a single mother, she is raising him in a different way than she would have raised him had her husband been with her. So now that son is growing up to be a lot more of a feminist than he would have been otherwise. I just love stories like that. And I get those kind of stories almost every single day from different women.
That's and it's gonna continue on for you. Alka, I have to say that I was really, when the coronavirus hit, and I did this Facebook post for you and other things, because I was like, this book is great, and it's so unfair because the coronavirus hit. Now she doesn't have any events, so buy out this book, And then I could not have foreseen all this great stuff, I could have, because the book deserved it, but who knows? I don't want to be like too dishy here, but you do have to talk a little bit about talking to Reese Witherspoon and what the whole thing of getting to her club has been like.
So we found out on March 11th. My editor called me from the publishing house and said, from Mira HarperCollins, and she said, hey, I have something really important to tell you. Reese Witherspoon is going to pick your book for May. And I was like, oh my God, that was like the last thing I expected. Oh my God. I was just, oh my God. And then my husband comes down from the second floor and he goes, what's going on? What's going on? I hear all of this, oh my God, going on. So I told him what was going on. And then what happens is that you have to stay mum about it until May 1st, which was the date she was going to announce the book. So during that time, what you're doing is developing content for all of their social media pages. Mm-hmm. And as you develop, like we're doing videos, we're doing essays. They want me to put together things about the jewelry in India and the spices and fragrances and all of this kind of stuff. So I'm putting all of that stuff together. Busy. And then finally May 1st comes, and then the book clubs start asking, hey, can you talk to our book club? Can you talk to our book club? And then that kind of, snowballed, and that's lovely to have happen. And then suddenly it's a New York Times bestseller, and then it's an LA Times bestseller, and then it's a USA Today bestseller. And you've been through this, so it's like, whoa, it's just like a book on steroids. And
I hate to tell you, this is not a normal set of circumstances that's happening to you. It's phenomenal. It's so exciting, and you so deserve it. I'm looking at a question from the audience, and someone is asking about a screenplay, about what's going on with getting the Henna Artist onto the screen. I don't know if you feel like sharing anything with people about it.
Well, all I can tell you is that there is an agency in LA who is fielding the inquiries for, a streaming series or a movie or a TV series of some kind. So, we may get some news soon. We may, I can't say too much. But I think whatever happens, it will be beautiful. Whatever anybody does with it, I think it will be a beautiful production.
You don't know that. I mean, it's a beautiful book, but it is. But from my friends who've gone through it, I think most of them feel like it's out of your hands, a little bit. Like it's not like you can control things like your cover, maybe your jacket copy. You can say on that, but at some point, and your hope is that they're going to take it on in a kind of proprietary way and have such pride that they turned it into its own beautiful thing, right? Yeah. I mean, you look at something like, The English Patient. I don't know if Michael Ondaatje could have even, when you read that book, you're wondering who could make a movie out of this, right?
Yeah.
Possible. And my friend Walter Kern, his book Up in the Air,
yeah.
I think he thinks the movie's better than, the book is fantastic, but he thinks the book's better than that the movie's better than the book. So
I love that movie. Yeah.
And then other people, I did an interview with Bret Easton Ellis, and he hated, I mean, he hated Lesson Zero. He really hated American Psycho, which brought, you know, like not everyone did, but he, for some people, you know, and even though the movie's a success, they can't. So who knows?
Yeah.
We're taking more questions if people want to see it. I can see you on the chat screen. But I don't see too many. Yeah, Jane says, ask for questions. Can I get some questions? Okay, here we go. Here's a question. Loved how you showed a close relationship between Lakshmi and Malik. Considering the taboo around Hindu and Muslims in India, it was beautifully woven together. What influenced this relationship?
Okay. So I really wanted to show that in India, the way that the West perceives what's happening in India with conflicts between the Muslims and Hindus, you would think that we're all at each other's throats all the time. And that is not the case. So in India, you know, Hindus live next to Muslims, live next to Punjabis, live next to Sikhs. They, you know, they're all living in the same communities. They celebrate a lot of the same holidays. And, you know, like that celebration of Holi with the colored powder and everything, everybody celebrates that. People love that. And so what I wanted to show in this is that Lakshmi is Hindu, Malik is Muslim. And they work together. They work together every day. They have very close feelings about each other. They are almost operate like a family unit. And there are a lot of people in India who operate like that, despite their differences in caste or religion or language. So I wanted in a very organic way to show that this is a society that has a lot of differences, and yet people find ways to coexist. And of course, I wanted to also point out the very subtle differences in day-to-day living that do say to people, you are different from me. So I want to say both. I want to say, yes, we can all live together, but yes, there are still these little touchy areas that we get into where, you know, like Sheila Sharma does not want Malik to be there for her Sangeet because he's Muslim. She doesn't want him to be a part of a Hindu ceremony. So there are these little things that I tried to show in very subtle ways that do point out some caste, class, religious differences between people in India.
Another question is, Alka, did Lakshmi's basic character arc change much or any from the start of writing the novel?
Yes, Lakshmi's arc changed a lot. For instance, in the very beginning, you know, I had so many different ways that her relationship with Samir could have gone. I had different ways that her relationship with Hari could have gone. So every different draft will have a different, you know, sort of ending or different trajectory for Lakshmi. I had a lot of different ways that she could have gone, but I love the way it all ended up. And I think a lot of that, I have to give the credit to my editor at Mira, because she asked me one central question that really helped solidify Lakshmi's trajectory. She said, Hari is her husband. He's the only character in the book who seems to be without any remorse. He seems to have no redeemable characteristics whatsoever. Is there anything you can do to bring him into a three-dimensional form? Because right now he's kind of a cardboard guy. Every other character, you've got different sides to them, but not him. And I said, well, I don't like him. I don't want him to be likable by people. And she said, no, come on, just try it. So I did. And in that process of figuring out how Hari could have come from a place of lack of understanding of Lakshmi to an understanding of the women who actually need these herbal remedies, need some contraception, need some kind of help when they have been abused by a husband. I think through that, I was able to see that at the end, Lakshmi needed to say goodbye to Hari. She needed to say goodbye to that relationship. She needed to let go of all that guilt that she's been carrying around all these years for having left him and deserted that marriage. And he needs to say goodbye to her. And so I thought, oh, so on the very last chapter, that's what we need. We need a reconciliation between these two. That will make the most sense. And, you know, every reader loves the way that that ended. So I'm really glad that that happened. And then, of course, she said, now you need an epilogue. And I have a suggestion for you. So she gave me the suggestion, and that's the epilogue that exists in the book today. I mean, one of the things I found out, Tom, is that all the people who give you feedback, all the people have something important to contribute. You can't negate anything that anybody tells you. You just need to sit with it. And sometimes you'll say, well, that'll work, that won't work, that'll work, that won't work. But as time goes on, the more you write, the more you realize, oh, that is a great idea, that I can do, that is going to make this thing sing. So I think experience teaches you which parts of feedback you should incorporate. And
it's such a big part of it. I think I probably told you that in workshop, a lot of it, because it's basically, you know, in a lot of the prescriptive things they're not necessarily right, but they're on. I usually think, well, you're on to something. I may not want to do exactly what you just told me, you know, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you reject it, and then you try it on for a while, and it has to feel organic to your book. You have to sort of, you know, almost imagine that you came up with it, you know, because if it's like they came up with it and it's just like a Band-Aid on there, it doesn't tend to work. But and being open to the things that people have to offer. This is an interesting question. Someone says, are you ever going to lead a Jaipur, the Henna Artist tour? And someone else said, I'd sign up for that. So
well, let's talk about that once the pandemic is over.
Right. I don't think anybody's anxious to jump on a plane. And someone else wants to know if you host book club dinners with recipes from the book. So
of course, because we've had a pandemic, we haven't done anything like that. But I was recently invited by a book group that hosted me virtually first. But here in the Monterey area, they decided to do a social distancing dinner. So they had this enormous table set up, and we're all like 6 feet apart from each other. They had the event catered, and it was all Indian food, and it was delicious. And to start off with, of course, we had Maharani cocktails and mango margaritas. And Maharani cocktails is something my older brother mother invented for me, because I said, can you come up with some kind of a cocktail that would be really good to eat with Indian food? So he did. And so it's like a gin and tonic that the older Maharani would have drunk.
That's great. Someone says, hi, Alka, I was surprised about the reference of the adoption by the royal family due to superstition. Does this actually happen?
Yes, it does. So that's part of the research that I was doing. And I was surprised to find that many Maharajas, many royals, would not have their own natural born children if an astrologer told them that that child would try to steal the crown away from them. So then they would adopt outside of the family. And they would always try to adopt another warrior caste child. But yeah, they would adopt outside of the family. Yeah, that was so fascinating to me that I thought, oh, that could lead to something. That could really lead to, you know how you have these little moments where you do some research and you go, that could lead to something. And then you figure out where to pigeonhole it.
Yeah, and you know, I was thinking that I mean, so when you talk about research, and one of the things I say is I sort of borrow my character's brain as I research, because then I know their needs, or then, you know, and also how they would see that and how they would use it, rather than just having it in that kind of dry way. But yeah, there were also, like, I wrote this thing in the Dakota that was really important to me. I didn't realize that the first 7 floors were these grand apartments, and the 8th and 9th floors were servants' quarters, and there was a totally different population. It was like upstairs, downstairs, reversed. And then that's where I knew my character would live. So it's like sometimes big parts of your book happen because you stumble over something in the research, right? Wow. You know, and that's
yeah. Tom, for some reason, I think I read the Dakota thinking that you actually lived there. I read Dakota Winters thinking you actually lived there.
I lived 5 blocks away. And so I grew up in the Upper West Side. And I'm glad you thought so. But I've been in the building a couple times. My stepmother has a friend there. And then there's a friend of mine, a novelist, Nina Solomon, and she grew up there. And so I've been to the building twice. And both people took me up to those top floors and they showed me all sorts of ins and outs. So I wanted to get familiar enough, with it to be able to.
Wow. Well, okay, so that's a testament to your writing. People felt like they were there. I thought you had actually lived there, which is why I think it was so descriptively, it felt authentic. And people say that about my book all the time. They go, it feels like I'm walking the streets of Jaipur. I'm there. I'm smelling things. I'm hearing things. I'm seeing the cows on the street. I'm seeing the peacock flying overhead. Yeah, I mean, it is amazing how when you can get into your world like that, you convince readers that maybe they're there too.
I have to say, I only spent 3 days in Jaipur, but it was dazzling, and it is so, and the clothes in Rajasthan is just gorgeous. The colors, the street life, I mean, everything about it. And I remember staying in, I think it was the pensiones were pretty cheap, but this place was only like, I don't know, remember it was $10 a night or something. Yeah, but it was ridiculous, and it was like a little suite, and oh God, it had the light in the city is beautiful. I mean, stuff that you captured in the book, but it's not that you took something that wasn't stunning and made it stunning. I mean, it is. But so here's the trick, so when you have something that's that beautiful and that how do you do it justice? I mean, it's almost other people, you could do Schenectady justice more easily than you. Alka, try to create Jaipur in a way that makes me sort of feel it. It's a challenge. It's a pretty extraordinary place.
Yeah. No, it's so true. How old were you when you were there?
Oh, it was right after college. I was, 22.
So you just travel with a backpack, right?
Yeah. Well, I had a job in, I don't know if you've ever heard of Tiger Tops Mountain Travel India. And so we did treks up in Ladakh. And then, so my parents had gone to India and they met a couple who worked for this British tour company. And actually, Princess Margaret's son, the Viscount David Lindley, was on one of my treks. So it was like very British and Italian,
wow,
traveling around India. And then I went on my own and I went through Rajasthan. And I was in Agra and went to see the Taj, and that was unbelievable. So,
well, speaking of royals, so in Rajasthan, in the various cities of Rajasthan, you can actually see the royals. They're driving around in their cars. You can see the Maharajas and the Maharanis. My mother actually had an audience with the young Maharani, who was the model for the young Maharani in the book. And also, I even named her Latika, which was my mother's middle name. But that Maharani actually existed, and she actually set up a school in Jaipur called the Maharani Gayatri Devi School. And that is the model for the Maharani School for Girls that's in the book. So that's actually modeled after a real person who wanted young women to be raised in a kind of Western way. And, it's so wonderful when you have real people that you can sort of use as a model for character. And because they're going to sound so much more authentic that way. But then, I changed all sorts of other details about her life, and I made up the whole room that she lives in and all of that. But when Mom and I were there, we visited the Jaipur Palace. I'm sure you've been to the Jaipur Palace.
Yes.
It really does look like that. It is a grand, fabulous place with lots of, topiary and these huge silver urns that were used to carry water from India to England.
I rode around on an elephant, like in a little box on an elephant in Jaipur.
Oh.
So it was amazing trip. We have a question. Alka was born in Jodhpur. Someone asked, what does she remember about life there?
I don't remember Jodhpur. I was too young when we left. I think I must have been only 4, when we left. So I don't remember a lot about Jodhpur. So while the only thing I do remember is that Jaipur is known as the Pink City and Jodhpur is known as the Blue City because a lot of the homes and the rooftops are painted blue.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
That's nice. Well, great. So you've written the second book, and it's done. It's 5 months and revisions, everything. It's ready to go.
I just got revisions today. So I'll be working on those for the next month and a half and getting those back out to her. The cover is being done as we speak. By the way, you know, there are several things I found out as an author that I actually didn't have a lot of control over, and one of them was the cover. I mean, I said, do I get to tell you what I want the cover to be? And they said, no. Our art department does that. No, we don't touch that. And so, but then when I opened up the PDF and this was the first cover, I was like, oh, thank you. I love it. I love it. I love it. It was so reminiscent of Lakshmi walking through the palace. And then another thing I found out is the name. I wanted the name to be Enemy of the Crocodile because I have a proverb in there saying only a fool stays in the water and remains an enemy of the crocodile. And the publisher said, no. The Henna Artist, that will telegraph right away what the book is about. So I've been finding out all along the way what I actually do get to affect and what I don't get to.
Which is a good segue to another question, which is someone asked, what's the title of the second book?
Right now, the working title is the Royal Jewel Cinema.
The Royal Jewel Cinema. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we all can't wait to read it. I think I'm going to wrap it. And Jane, do you want to join us here at this point, or?
We also have to mention again that your paperback for the Dakota Winters is coming out. Right?
It's out, yes, and it's coming out in France and Germany this year, which is nice. And where else are you going other than India? Is it coming out in other countries?
Australia, UK, and India so far, and then it's being translated into a lot of different languages. Yeah.
Fantastic. So wonderful.
Well, I hate to break this off, but it seems like a natural point at which to thank everybody for their attendance. And
also thank you, Jane, and thank you to the Litquake Foundation.
Yeah, donate to Litquake, folks.
And buy their books, and we'll all be happy. There's your little pop-up for donating to Litquake. Wow, very good, Hunter. We have lots more of these coming up, and this one was absolutely stellar. I'm sure you'll be able to tell your friends about it, and they can find it on our Facebook page. We're recording this for later viewing. So thank you all so much. Thank you to Alka and to Tom. It was an absolutely fantastic question. And good night to everybody. Keep reading and stay safe.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Namaste.